What's up, everyone? Thanks for being here. I'm Devin, executive producer over at Devenio Podcast, and today I'm really excited about this conversation because we're talking with Nicole Silberstein, the former editor-in-chief at Retail Touchpoints and the former host of the Retail Remix podcast. Over the last year, I got to watch Nicole grow into one of the strongest podcast hosts I've ever had the pleasure to work with. But what makes her story really interesting is how podcasting was never really on her radar in the first place. It was never part of her full-time job, and she had to learn how to balance the responsibility alongside everything else on her plate, as well as taking an already established show and maintaining the momentum. So today, we're digging into that journey. What she had to learn along the way, what makes a really great B2B host, and how someone can learn to grow into that role while still balancing everything else they have to do in their day-to-day. Nicole, thanks so much for joining the show. Great to see you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm really excited about this conversation today to really kind of dive deep into your metamorphosis into this amazing podcast host that you've become. You were the editor-in-chief at Retail Touchpoints and the host of the Retail Remix podcast. For anybody who's watching that may not know what that is, why don't you kind of give us a breakdown of your background and, what Retail Remix was, what Retail Touchpoints is.
Sure. I mean, I do hope you didn't kind of set the bar a little too high for me there with words like metamorphosis and amazing, but I'll try to meet it. So I'm a journalist by trade. I've worked in business journalism my whole life. For the last 5 years, I've been at Retail Touchpoints, which fittingly covers the world of retail. And last year, our colleague who was the head of content and the host of the podcast left the company, and we went through a restructure, and I was promoted to editor-in-chief, which at the time did not also include hosting the podcast. I mean, just taking over that editor-in-chief role was more than enough for me at the time. The podcast was a little bit of an unexpected surprise a few weeks later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and on that note, I guess we could talk about sort of you inheriting the show.
Yeah.
First off, you said it was an unexpected surprise. Was podcasting ever on your radar ever throughout your career? Was it something you had ever thought you'd find yourself doing before?
No, I mean, definitely not. I mean, there's a reason that I went to school and became a writer. Like I am not somebody who enjoys the spotlight. Even being here today with you induced some nerves. I just have never been like a performer like that, right? And a lot of the things that I'm now being asked, and many journalists are now being asked to do, are very foreign to me because I grew up and I trained to be a writer. I didn't train to be on video for sure. Podcasting was never something that was on my radar or an ambition of mine. I prefer the slower medium of writing where you have a chance to think about what you want to say, edit yourself. There's something about the performative aspect of video and audio that is still very intimidating to me.
It's funny because I work mainly behind the scenes for the most part. For most of my career, I've worked behind the scenes. And I, for that exact reason, prefer that. I prefer to be behind the scenes. Right now, on camera with you, this is something that I've had to learn over the course of time. It's not easy. It's a completely different world.
Well, and you saw it was very, very hard and intimidating for me. I tried to say no at first when they told me that we needed to bring back the podcast from hiatus and I needed to host it. I'm the same way too. I do love entertainment and production, but I would always prefer to be the person kind of behind the scenes, never the person on the stage.
Yeah.
So I tried to say no at first when they told me we needed to do the podcast.
And they said no choice in the matter.
They said, yeah, you have to, and you have to. I think the other thing that was really intimidating was it was an unexpected thing. The show had been put on hiatus. The former host was gone, and Alicia, that host, was really the person who created the whole thing. She had been doing it, and she hosted it for years. It was really her baby and her show. And I never would have wanted to take that over, except that I was told I had to. That we needed it to come back. Basically, what happened was we got somebody interested in sponsoring it, and it hadn't existed. And they said it needs to now exist again as soon as it possibly can. And so not
And
only did I have to kind of think about taking on this thing that I didn't really see as mine, but I also had to do it as quick as possible. And it was also a skill I didn't have at all. So I also had to kind of like train myself up as fast as I could to be able to do it.
the hero of retail touch points, stepping in when needed,
Is that me? Are you
swooping in,
talking about me, the
swooping
hero?
in. Yeah, yeah. Swooping in.
The
Yeah,
reluctantly, very
yeah.
reluctantly, like
The
tried to
reluctant hero.
cower behind her chair and hope they didn't notice that she wasn't there.
Well, it's very
Yeah,
brave of you to do it regardless, because there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of fear. It's brand new. You've never done it before,
yeah,
right? So pretty brave of you to take it on and the way you did. The show had, as you alluded to, had sort of momentum already. It was a show with an audience. Alicia had developed this audience over time and, had put her own stamp on the show. So when you kind of got started with this, I'm sure it was something that was on your mind. You already kind of mentioned it, but how did you sort of think about, if at all, maybe you didn't, carrying that momentum forward as you began?
I mean, initially, all I was concerned with was not dropping the ball, like doing the thing that Alicia had created proud, and not just like kind of destroying it in the process. So I wasn't at all considering how I might grow it. How I just really, it was like survival mode. Like just keep this alive and don't kill it. That was the attitude I had at the beginning.
So that's a good way to start things off, right? So I guess, when you got started, why don't you tell me a little bit about, you know, were you aware going into this, and I'm going to guess no, but were you aware of sort of the demands that this show would have on your daily workflow in order to keep this afloat, in order to not kill it? Were you aware
Yeah.
of what this was going to demand from your time and effort and all of that?
I mean, I would say not specifically, but I did 100% know that it was going to be very demanding from a time and an energy perspective. I mean, I had watched Alicia do this. I certainly didn't see how much was going on behind the scenes, but I knew it was a lot. Which that again was another reason why I really tried to push back. I was also taking on a new role at the publication. We didn't backfill my old role. And so we were trying to also maintain what the publication was doing with a staff that was now one person lighter. So part a big chunk of my trepidation was knowing it was going to be a lot of work, maybe not specifically how much, but knowing it was going to be a lot and not sure if it was even feasible.
Yeah. So, and how did your workflow, how did you in the beginning start integrating this into your workflow? What were some of the steps that you kind of took to find the efficiency that you eventually found?
I mean, there's something kind of liberating about not having a choice in the end. Like when you are told you have to do something, then you just kind of hunker down and get it done. I don't really know if I ever got to, I mean, so many of the pieces of it are dependent on other people. It was never really, I never really found a way to have like a really regulated process for doing it every week. It was a lot of like, something would come across my desk or I'd meet a person and, then I would immediately reach out, see if they'd be interested, do all that follow up, try to schedule. But beyond creating templates for like the script and the brief that I
Yep.
would send to guests, I don't know if I ever really got to a point where there was like a very clear process
Hmm.
that I was able to follow in and out every week the same way.
Right. So what would you say, like, let's talk about guests, right?
Yeah.
So from where I'm sitting, and we worked with you on the production of the show. So where I'm sitting, it seemed like you had a pretty good process of, you had mentioned sort of doing the briefing and stuff like that and getting that out to the guests.
Yeah.
How were you sourcing these guests? Were there any like crossover with retail touch points on the publication side, the written stuff? Like, how were you sourcing guests and finding the stories to bring to that audio format?
I would say that was one of the big benefits of having that other job in addition to podcast host, because it did, as far as finding people to be on the podcast, that was very naturally integrated into my life. I was already always kind of engaging with people or getting pitches of people or companies who would be interesting to cover on the publication side. And so it just very naturally became a part of my process that when those pitches would come through or when I would encounter somebody interesting, the question now would be not should we write about them, but should we write about them or should they be on the podcast or should we do both? There
Both,
was
yeah.
only a few instances where I think we did both, where like I wrote a story and then we also had them on the podcast. And honestly, probably we should have done more of that because I do think the audiences were pretty different.
Interesting. So during this process and finding your rhythm, I guess, what were some of the biggest challenges that you found in the very beginning specifically?
Challenges with like the mechanics of making it happen or with the actual like hosting? Because
Yeah,
there were two very different pieces, I think,
is
of the puzzle.
that is a very good point. Let's talk about at first sort of integrating this into your daily workflow and
Okay.
your daily, your day job for lack of a better term, right? Like what were some of the big challenges that you found on the process side of things rather than the hosting side of things?
I Well, I was very lucky. This had already existed for many years. You and your team and Alicia had already developed a whole process for a lot of this. So basically, I just had to kind of understand it and then do the booking piece on my own. So I think the only real challenge was me just kind of getting up to speed, having not been a part of it before. And then also just finding the time to add that extra to do onto the list. So as you know, like the booking of the guests, it's never just a one-off thing. Like, do you want to be on? Yes, perfect. It takes a lot of back and forth to sometimes convince people to participate. And then even after that, it's about finding the time that works. So it was more of like a time challenge on that. There was no skill in there that I didn't already feel comfortable with. Like it was basically
Okay.
just scheduling and communicating with people. So there was nothing there that made me feel uncomfortable. It was just a time suck. It just took a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So for somebody that's in a similar position, right? They're just sort of taking on a new podcast. Maybe it is thrust upon them. Maybe it's something that it was never on their radar before. Or maybe it's something that they've always wanted to do, but have never really thought about what that entails. What would you say would be the most important thing that they should focus on early on during the process?
At least in my case, it was having people, like good people at your side. So in my case, that was you. I never, ever, ever could have done this without you and your team and everything that you bring to the process. And there was actually conversations about like, oh, we should just do this in house and use free tools. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And luckily, we had an advocate at the company who was like, absolutely not. The end product will be something that we won't be able to be proud of. And I'm forever grateful for that because even just personally moving into this very foreign medium, having your help and your advice while I did that was absolutely invaluable. I would say have somebody by your side, even if it's just somebody else on your team who you can run things by or get opinions on, because trying to do it all on your own, especially if you've never done it before, I think that would be really, really hard. Not impossible, but maybe less fun and a lot harder.
Yeah, it takes a team, right?
Yeah,
And
it does.
it's not as easy and quick, or it's not as quick and easy as sometimes it might seem. It definitely takes a team to kind of put every episode together and get it published out
I know.
on the RSS feed. So,
I think people
yeah,
don't. I think we all have this impression just because it is possible for anybody to do a podcast now. So we have this
yeah,
impression that it's actually really easy. And it it just, the amount of time that goes into it, you don't see that in the 20-minute episode, you know? I
Definitely
mean, you
not.
do, because it turns out to be if it turns out to be a good product, then I guess that effort is showing in that way. But how much time it takes to pull together those 20-30 minutes is absolutely invisible. And so I think podcasts get this reputation as like low barrier of entry. But really, to do it well, man, it's a lot of work.
But that's the key distinction, I think, is to do it well. And that's
Right.
something that I always really respected from you is your bar has always been high and you've always expected quality. And that's something that I've always kind of connected with you on and really respected. So and on that note, I really would like to kind of get into the meat of this conversation around the hosting of this. Because the story, to me, the most fascinating part of this story is not the X's and O's and sort of how you worked out a process. And so what really is interesting to me is this is something that you didn't have on your radar. It wasn't something that you ever thought to do before. And now all of a sudden you're thrust into the situation where you're a host of a show, it's a podcast, it's a show, right? You're a show host. That in and of itself is a skill. It's something that, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I have the answer to this. It's something that I will ask you later. Could be something that's innate or something that could be learned, right? So like
Yeah.
there's all of these variables at play. And what really fascinated me about it is how you stepped into this role and you became, an amazing host, in my opinion. You really stepped into the role and made it your own and found this sort of superpower that you may not have known you had all along. So I guess my question is, there was a learning curve there over time, specifically on the hosting. And I know this because after we got done recording episodes, you would ask me questions about how you approached certain things. So
Yeah.
I would love to learn about how you approached this from the very beginning to where you ended your tenure at Retail Remix, from the hosting perspective, all of those things that you learned.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that there are many people who would not find this as intimidating as I did. I was actually just listening to Oprah's podcast, and she said something about how being on stage talking to people felt like breathing to her. That clearly, this is something that many people really love and would not be scared shitless like I was. But regardless, the situation was such that it was very outside of my comfort zone and my wheelhouse, and I still had to do it. I didn't have a choice. So I kind of resorted to my journalism, muscles, which is like, okay, you don't know anything about this, you better start researching. So that started with re-listening to episodes of Alicia hosting the podcast, but also listening to other podcast hosts and trying to get a feel for like what this all was. The thing that helped me a little bit as I was doing that is that I realized that I do know how to interview people. I've been doing that for 25 years. I've just never had to do it, on a stage before. And there is definitely, I am just one of those people who just doesn't like being on camera. So that is a hurdle for me. But reminding myself that I didn't know how to do it. I know how to have conversations. And also, I like those conversations. I love talking to new people who do different things totally outside of what I do. And so kind of grounding myself in that gave me a little bit of confidence. And then I did go through, like I really scripted myself because that was the only way I could feel like I knew what I was doing. And I think one of the biggest learning curves for me through the course of it and a lot of the advice you gave me was about being able to break out from that script a little bit, though, because I do think I modeled myself a lot after NPR. I'm a lifelong NPR listener. And so I went at it a very kind of like journalistically, like news broadcast, like question and answer approach at the beginning. And I remember you reminding me a number of times, like there was a little bit more freedom in the podcast forum and people liked a little bit of personality from their hosts. And I think so. And I don't think I ever really fully got there. I think there was still a lot of room for me to grow, but just like kind of injecting some personality and loosening up a little bit, not always needing to follow my script, questions 1 through 10. That was the biggest learning curve. And also getting over my nerves. It just took me doing it a number of times to not feel sick to my stomach in advance of every recording.
I'm sorry if I've made you feel sick to your stomach this morning.
You did it. Oh yeah. That's the other thing is today you totally flipped the tables on me. Now I'm doing something also totally outside of my wheelhouse. I have to answer the questions, which is a whole different ball game. So you did
Yes.
make me feel very unwell this morning.
Well, one of the things I think is really cool that you alluded to, and I think this is something that is you might not have actually said it, but it's something that I think is not talked about often and is important for a host is the passion behind things. And that is something that I think really separates you and puts you at another level is your passion for the material and the conversations that you're having. You really are fascinated by these people that you have on the show. And you really, I've always said that a podcast host is almost like an avatar for the listener, right? The listener, your job as a podcast host is to ask the questions that if the listener were in the room, they'd want to be asking, right? And sometimes maybe throw in questions, take it to another level, ask the questions that they might not have ever thought to ask in the first place, like that new aha moment for them, right? So I think that the listeners and the people that are passionate about retail, right? You were that avatar because you are passionate about retail. And I think that's important for a host as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That also was what made it fun. I wish you shared that with me sooner. I love that. That's a very helpful kind of visualization to think of yourself as the avatar for the listener. That was another thing that sometimes I think I didn't fully get where I wanted to go, which was sometimes you still just kind of, also if the guest is a little bit nervous, you do tend to kind of keep falling back on your script, right? And there are moments where a question might arise that wasn't in the initial set that you shared. And those are the things that are probably, if that question's popping in your head, is probably popping into the heads of your audience. Finding ways to interject those kind of like spur of the moment questions naturally without throwing the guest off was something sometimes I was able to do it and sometimes I didn't. So I think that is a constant like kind of balance of like having that script, that preparation, but also being in the moment in the conversation.
So yeah, that is definitely a learned skill. And, I know you had mentioned to me that you were, you had some tactics in order to do that. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, what I was telling. So I am a very, again, writer. So I'm like a pen and paper person. So even though I would have my script up on screen with me, I also had always a printed version. Even today, I have a printed version of what we're going to talk about. And one thing that was really helpful in having that printed version, I almost never referred to it actually question wise, but I would make notes for myself if there was something really that like stuck with me, like a phrasing or something specifically that the guest had said. I would make a note so that I could make sure to, lead with that into my next question or follow up on it later, or maybe skip down in the script and ask the question that was more relevant to what the guest's answer had been. So having that pen and paper here really helped me though, because if you're trying to actually be actively involved in the conversation, you should really be listening. You can't be like scribbling a ton of notes to yourself or like stopping and saying, oh, I need to rearrange my script. Can you hold on a second? So it would just be like a couple of like words to just remind me, okay, one piece of that answer was really interesting. Let's circle back on that. So that helped me.
And what I think it also helped you do, which is another skill in and of itself, and I always said that a telltale sign of a very good host would be somebody that can segue well, right? And like, we joke there's ad spots, right? On the show. And we used to not break for ads. We would just find a spot to just inject an ad spot in. And Alicia was actually very good at this as well. We would joke about it with Alicia, but you were very good at segueing, and you you would explore the conversation that's being had and somehow very seamlessly connect it to the very next question. And that made it impossible to find a logical gap to put an ad break in. So we had to start breaking for
I
ad. We would
remember
say it.
that moment and I felt very proud because I remember you telling me Alicia used to be really good at that. And I never really felt like I was going to ever get there, you know? And so then when you were like, hey, we got to start doing this, I was like, yes.
Little milestone to be
Yeah.
proud of. Yeah.
Challenge,
Yeah.
accomplishment met.
Well, on that note, when did you feel like now you're, the host of the show for a while? So like when did you start feeling that it wasn't Alicia's anymore, right? Like
Yeah.
this is your show now. Like when did things start to click and you sort of embraced and took over?
I think it didn't happen all at once. There was a few phases. Like I would say after about like the fourth or fifth episode, I started to get more comfortable so that I wasn't nervous and so that I was having a little bit more fun and really enjoying the conversations. I remember one specific one. It was either the fourth or the fifth where I was like enjoying the conversation and almost forgot for a second that we were recording. So that was like really revelatory for me. I was like, whoa, that was cool. And so then it did really help to not have so many nerves going into every episode. I think the moment when I really felt like I took ownership of it was when I added my rapid fire section
Yep.
at the end,
Yep.
which really because I just what happened was I actually somebody invited me to be on their podcast. And so I also shit my pants and then I went on their podcast and it was fine. And and she did that at the end. She had a rapid fire section. Hers was a little different than mine. It was very much like one word answers.
Yeah.
But what I started to use mine for was all the like more like fun, like kind of like lighthearted, maybe more personal stuff. Because as you're researching these people and companies, there's so many like fun things you could ask that aren't necessarily like business focused. And so this became my place to do that. And honestly, at the end of every episode, those ended up being like, I think my favorite parts of the episode. I think if I had kept doing it, I might have started talking to you about like, I wonder how I could incorporate some of this stuff sooner because some of the most fun parts of the conversation would end up coming at the end when I would ask like, the CTO of a jewelry brand, but you studied history at Cambridge, like how did that happen? How did you get this job eventually? Those kinds of things. So that I think was the moment when I was like, okay, it's mine now, to the point that I'm gonna make some changes or additions at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also an important note about the fun of things, right?
Yeah.
So, when you're having fun on the show, that's going to translate. The audience is going to have fun too. And we sometimes forget, yeah, it's content, it's B2B, but like there, especially in the podcast space, like we're here to be entertained as well, right? So like having those moments on the show, I think is really important. And you really sort of embraced that and brought it into and you're right. The rapid fire retail questions, you know, I, I don't I don't do this very often, but it, it would, when we were done and we would wrap and recording's done, right? It would prompt me to kind of
Yeah.
chime in and speak to the guest. I would have questions about
Sometimes I would
things,
wish we would always have the really fun like follow-up conversations at the end. And sometimes I
Yeah.
would wish we were still recording.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there is something to, I mean, I'm not the only one. I saw it happen with guest after guest. That record button goes on and you kind of just, you stiffen up a
Yep.
little bit,
Oh, yeah.
right? There were a number, I think the thing too, like being curious, being interested in the person that you're talking to, all of that really helps. I think another thing that is very hard though is helping them if they're nervous. And I got a little bit better, but I never really got there. I do remember there's a few episodes where where we would have that. We would run through the actual recording and the person would be so stiff. They might even be like kind of reading off of a script and you could really tell. And the recording would end and we would just continue talking and it would be such a good conversation. And I
Yeah.
would say to myself, like, okay, you got to start finding a way to get them to do that because they obviously know what they're talking about. They just don't believe it.
Sure.
That I don't think I ever got there where I could, in the moment during the recording, There were moments, but like that's a hard thing to help
Yeah.
somebody get comfortable enough so that they can loosen up from their
Well,
own
because everybody's
script.
different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, right? But I think that's hugely important is loosening up and allowing the person to be themselves on camera. Because I mean, you both of us are not comfortable in front of the camera, so
Yeah.
we get it, right?
We're a good
Like,
example right now.
yeah, yeah, right. So it is incredibly difficult to know how to help every individual relax, and
Yeah.
that's an important part of this is really getting the authenticity of the guest shine through. So definitely I think that's a big learning moment.
Yeah. And like you say, it's hard to do because every person is different. So not what might make one person comfortable. Humor almost never failed. The
Yeah,
problem
that's
is
true.
you have to be able to find the joke. Sometimes I was like, God, you got to loosen things up, and I just couldn't find a joke, you know? So it just carried on the way it was.
it's it's
But when I
uh
could
it's
find the joke, it would work.
yeah, yeah. The episodes with the laughter, were always special ones. Like when
Yeah.
you were laughing constantly, like you knew it was going to be a very, very good episode. So yeah, again, comes back to it's B2B, but we're here to be entertained as well, right? If you can entertain people while also informing them, you have a better chance of the information sinking in. They're going to be locked on for a longer period of time. Now, when you comparatively to when you first started hosting, how did your mindset change? Like when you signed off on your last episode compared to when you were signing on for your first episode, was there any change in mindset to your approach or to your role as a host on the show?
I mean, definitely. I think you can tell. I loved it, and that shocked the hell out of me. Like, but once I got over the hurdle of being so nervous about it, um, it I really fell in love with it. It's a really fun and different way to bring stories and people to an audience. And one of the best things about it, while the prep work is maybe more intense than for an article, the great thing is that you have the conversation and that is the product. So it was actually really liberating for me not to have another 6 hours of like transcribing, writing, and editing afterwards. But I think it really, really surprised me how much I ended up loving doing it because I really resisted it so much at the beginning.
Yeah, and again that shows with the passion. So, you have a passion for the material and the conversations that you're having, but
Yeah.
you could tell you really started to love the role as time went on. It was something that you kind of found, which I always when I find a new love, cooking is a good example. 2 years ago I really started diving into the world of cooking and fell in love with it. And I love those moments where you never thought that you would ever fall in love with something and then you do, and it's now part of your life. So that's awesome to hear. And then it carried, all of this carried over to the success of the show. It went on hiatus and then it was thrust upon you, and it was a lot of unknowns. You didn't know what was going to happen, and you kind of sunk into the role, fell in love with it, and it showed because the show really showed some great growth. And it not only, I mean, you said in the beginning, the goal was just to not let it die, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of thrived. So, like, what do you think led to that momentum and growth of the show as you went along?
Well, one thing we have to be honest about is that for the first time ever, we did put some ad dollars behind it because we had a sponsor suddenly attached and it had been off the air, I guess you say. Can you say that with the podcast? It had been on hiatus for like 5 months. So we kind of needed really quickly to let people know it was back. And we started putting not too much money behind it. And that really helped. That really helped bring it to, I think, new people. And that really did help the growth numbers. I think another signal that it was going well was when the sponsor who started this whole thing
Mhm.
re-upped and came back
Yep.
on for an even bigger package. That to me was the biggest kind of vote of confidence in what we were doing, and that it was working and that it was going well. So that felt really good.
Do you have any idea as to what you think maybe made the show so attractive to sponsorship, other than the obvious that there are numbers behind it? Do you think there
Well,
was any other factors?
I think like with most like niche small podcasts, because like our podcast is not huge. What we have going for us is a very targeted niche audience that was exactly the people that this sponsor needed to reach. And I think when then we were able to show the momentum and the numbers to them, um, that was all they needed to see. They knew they were reaching the right
Yeah.
people, and they knew that it was, more and more of the right people. So
Yeah.
those two things kind of came together.
Okay. Awesome. And like I said, it was a very successful run. Almost, was it 2 years?
No,
No, it was 1 year.
it ended up being like 1 year. I mean, let's be
1 year.
the
Yeah.
the podcast is still going. It's just that I've left Retail Touchpoints, so
Correct.
I'm not the host of it anymore. But
Right.
it's still going. It was a little over a year that I got to do it.
Yeah. Great. A great growth rate over the course of that time. So it was a great run while you were there. Now that you're in this transition period, when you look back at your time with Retail Remix reflectively,
Hmm.
what goes through your mind?
I'm I think it's a really good lesson to have. Um, to refer back to, because I've basically taken a leap. I didn't leave Retail Touchpoints for another job. I'm kind of moving into the unknown, and I'm letting myself really just like follow my gut and pursue the things that I really want to do, before I really like dedicate myself to something next. But it can be easy when you're in that moment, in moments like that, to shy away for anything that feels hard. And I think this is like the best reminder maybe I've ever had in my life that uh, so doing hard things is often the most rewarding thing, though, too. Even if you don't end up enjoying the process, just proving to yourself that you can do it. And so I think I'm really holding on to that. Like, I'm trying not to let myself say no to anything unless the reason I'm saying no is because I'm really not interested, not because I'm scared. So
Yeah.
I do think it was really important for me as a human to just remember that just because it's scary doesn't mean it's something that you shouldn't do.
And on a personal level, would you say that that's probably your proudest moment as far as like over this entire experience? Do you think that just it seems cliche, but is the overall experience that you got through this and thrived, is that
I
the proudest
survived
moment?
it.
You survived it, and
Yeah,
not only
and
just
I kept it
survived it, but
alive.
you kept it alive and it thrived. Is that the proud moment? Is it the
I'm
retail, is it the
definitely
making it
really
your own?
I'm definitely really, really proud of that. I'm proud of the product that we ended up putting out in the world, and I share it with a lot of people because I'm proud of it. I I would also say I'm really proud there, because we were like a smaller kind of niche business podcast. We offered a nice kind of training ground for executives who needed to start doing more of this but were nervous about it. And so we often there it was not unusual that a guest we had on our show, this would be the first time they'd ever done a podcast. And I'm also really proud of how many times those first timers reached out to me afterwards and thanked me for making it comfortable and fun for them. Because that felt really full circle. Just having come into this so uncomfortable, not even considering that I might have fun. And then to know that I had been able to kind of do something similar for other people, I would say that to me was like kind of the biggest like full circle proud moment throughout the whole
That's
process.
that's beautiful. And I
Yeah.
almost want to end on that. That's how perfect that was. But I do have
Yeah.
one more question for you
Okay.
because the audience is going to want to know. So now that you're in the transition period here, what are you excited about in the future? And how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Well, I'm still on LinkedIn. I've been very open about all of this on LinkedIn, which is kind of scary because you do get a little bit judged on LinkedIn for any kind of gap in your work
Yeah. Oh
history,
yeah.
right? Which
Yep.
is maybe why I've been more vocal about it. I also maybe have gotten more used to being vocal, having done the podcast and just kind of
There you
sharing
go.
a little bit more of myself than I would
Yeah.
normally be comfortable with. So, whatever I do end up doing next, I'll definitely be sharing it there so you can connect with me there. But also, I think the thing that I'm excited about these next few months, and it's not going to be forever. I definitely am going to find another job, hopefully. But I'm excited to take a few months and just only follow my gut. So like and again, I'm not going to listen to my gut if it's telling me this is scary, you shouldn't do it. But if it's anything, even the slightest twinge of something sounds exciting, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to do it. And it could be personal or professional, but that's kind of my goal for myself the next couple of months. And
I love that.
I'm excited because I don't know where that will lead, but I think it could lead somewhere cool.
That's the era of exploration. I love that.
Yes.
And then personally, now that you have time, any new endeavors that you're taking on, any new hobbies or anything like that?
I was telling you that I have enrolled in a Learn to Row course because I'm from Colorado. I've grown up seeing, like, you know, all in TV and movies, the prep school boys, they're all on their, like, they're doing crew on the river, and it always looks so cool to me. But our rivers in Colorado, you can't do that. They're not flat and they have too many rocks. And now I live out on the East Coast, and I came across there's like a rowing association, and I was like, I'm going to do that. So I've had my second class. We haven't actually rowed all of us in unison yet. So,
Okay.
but I have to say, I'm already having like a total blast. I think I'm going to become a rower. If I don't even actually know if that's what you call yourself, but I do think I'm going to become a rower.
Editor-in-chief, podcast host, rower. Yeah, that's
et cetera, et cetera. Who knows what else?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that is the theme here is, you know, always keep open to trying something new and following that gut, and even if you're scared, give it that shot, because you never know what you're going to fall in love with, right?
But I would add to that too, that just try to find somebody who can act as like a sidekick or a guide, though, as you're going into those new waters, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't just get a boat and go out on the Passaic River. Like, I signed up for a class. And the same thing with the podcast. Like, you really guided me through, especially at the beginning. And I never would have done it, and I never would have gotten good at it without that guidance. So I do think that's kind of part of it too, is like, look to other people for advice and help.
Yeah. Have your friends around.
Yeah. And other experts. I mean, you know, other experts too.
Awesome. Well, I love this story. I loved the whole journey. So I appreciate you sharing it with us on this episode today.
Thanks, Devin. It was actually really fun to kind of like talk about it all with you.
Air it all out.
Yeah. It was really nice. Put a nice bow on the whole thing. So thanks.
Exactly. Of course. Awesome. Well, thank you, Nicole. Well, there you have it. I hope you found Nicole's story as fascinating as I did, and maybe even gained some insights that can help you if you're just getting started as a new podcast host. Her story is a great reminder that strong hosts aren't always the ones that start off polished. They're often the ones who stay committed, they keep learning, and they grow into the role over time. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. And for those of you starting out as a new podcast host, be sure to comment below and let me know what you're finding to be your biggest challenge as you get started. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.